Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to be presiding. Colleen's trying to save her voice. She's having some laryngitis issues, so she's trying to preserve it. So I'll be kind of running the meeting today. If you'd all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you all please still remain standing, we just want to, in remembrance of Andy DeLuna, who passed away last week. He's one of our longtime public servants, was a park commissioner as well as a Lodi Village Council. Thank you. We'll start with a prayer, please. Heavenly Father, we beseech your divine guidance in this meeting. Keep us ever mindful of our obligation. Grant us, dear Lord, wisdom, tolerance, and courage, that we may well serve our county and fulfill our trust. Amen. Amen. All right. We have the minutes of June 20th, 2023, Commissioners meeting. I will move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Okay. Any public comments regarding our pending resolutions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed. And we've got the County Engineer's Office, Dan Becker. Good morning.
Good morning. I've got two resolutions for your consideration today. The first resolution is approving consulting service contract with Refraction Research, Inc. And the second is necessity to close various county roads for various county road construction projects.
And I will move to approve both resolutions.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Pretty good. And Jeremy Sinkow, our sanitary engineer. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. I have one resolution for consideration today, and that's declaring the necessity to install an elevated storage tank in Brunswick Hills Township and authorizing the sanitary engineer to commence advertising for construction bids.
I will move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? I know this is a long time coming. Glad to see we're
It has
moving
been.
forward with it.
Yeah,
Very
I think
much needed.
I think we're looking at about a 750,000 gallon tank there.
Yeah,
so.
with all the development in that area, it's definitely going to be needed.
Yep, agreed.
Good. All right. Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Barb Walton, our Solid Waste District Director. Good morning, Barb.
Good morning, everybody. I have one resolution for consideration. It's for accepting and awarding the bid for recycling drop-off services for the Medina County Solid Waste Management District to Rumpke Waste and Recycling. This is actually a savings over the current contract of $217,091.
I will move to approve.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thanks. All right. Human Resources Director, Holly Murin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On our personal changes resolution today, we have 4 new hires, 1 in maintenance, 1 in sanitary, 1 in building, and 1 at job and family services. 6 rate increases, 3 at sanitary, 1 at county home, 1 at job and family services, and 1 in finance. 1 position change at office for older adults, 1 leave of absence at job and family services, and 1 resignation in maintenance.
I will move to approve.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And Chris Jacob, our County Administrator.
Good morning. Presenting the finance resolutions this morning. The first resolution amends the 2023 appropriation resolution by transferring appropriations for the Workforce Fund, Board of DD, and the Critical Infrastructure Grant Program for Lodi Village. Next resolution performs many and multiple expenditure adjustments for various funds. Next resolution authorizes a sales tax distribution to the various school districts located within Medina County. This is for the second quarter of 2023. Next resolution authorizes a transfer of funds from various department accounts to the county's software fund revenue line item. This is for the 5th-year accounting software contract cost for the Munis accounting system. Next resolution authorizes the county auditor to transfer funds from various county department accounts for print shop services delivered during the month of May 2023. Next resolution authorizes a contract for professional services of a beautician for the Medina County Home. This is for the period of July 1 through December 31st of this year, and is at a contract amount of $250 per month. Next resolution authorizes expenses for the Adult Probation Department for conference costs. This is for National Association of Pretrial Services mandatory training. It's for 2 of the probation department employees to attend. Next resolution for the county engineer authorizes expenditures for the statewide floodplain management conference in Columbus, Ohio. Next resolution allows expenses of county officials for the Human Resources Department and the APS Division of the Office for Older Adults, Adult Protective Services. Final resolution this morning is allowing claims and authorizing issuance. This is for approval of the weekly bills. This week's total is $5,108,073.26.
Move to approve the 10 resolutions.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to clarify, our weekly bills, obviously, they're a little bit higher this week. Is that because of our meeting next week being pushed back, or?
School tax.
Those-
Oh, that's the tax.
Actually, those are
School
for
sales.
school tax and the debt payments that are due.
Gotcha.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? Roll call, please.
Gambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Next, department updates. Shannon Ryan, our transit director. Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good.
May 2023 was a very good month for transit. We're continuing to see strong results from Wadsworth. I'll note that May of 2023, we had 660 trips as opposed to the average of 309 in 2022. And May of 2022, we had 239. So Wadsworth is working. We're getting positive results, continuing to see reduction in the amount of revenue and actual miles traveled by the vehicle, and the amount of fuel being used down. So cost savings with the rise in ridership is just really good news. The team's working hard to make sure that we continue to focus there. Looking at some of the numbers that we have that I watch very closely is the number of trip denials. You'll see that we had 63 trip denials in May this year in May, as opposed to 34 last year. This is showing that there's a demand increase that in some cases we're able to meet by negotiating trips. My team works very hard to do that. Our team works very hard to do that. Looking at some of the numbers on the monthly contract summary, we're seeing an uptick in ridership from our agencies as well. Office for Adults is up quite a bit from the previous year. We're seeing a trending of 15-18% increases in that area. Other agencies are increasing as well. So service is back and folks are taking the service. So some other things that are going on. I spoke last night and was invited to the Medina City Finance Committee for the City Council. Went very well. Presentation, I think we heard some good things about what we're doing, and very hopeful and optimistic things about what we're going to do in the future. So I've got some pamphlets that are very much similar. I'm going to hand each one of you to send it up. Thank you. It's publicizing very similar to what we did in Wadsworth. That will start rolling out very, very soon. A number of phone calls have started to come in. Medina is very excited about this. We feel that if all holds true from what happened in Wadsworth, we're going to see a strong performance. And just to give you an idea of what we think could happen in a very good way, in a measurable growth way, we're going to include some very popular spots for our customers to travel to on demand service in this Medina fixed route. For instance, the Career Center. You're talking about that. You're talking about Lake Road with all the businesses there, people traveling to work, which I'm very excited about. And and we'll see what we can do there to communicate to those businesses. And it's also going to include the county home, which is a good grab for folks that want to ride the bus into town, and basically ride the Flex route, the MC Flex in Medina. And then it's going to go all the way out to the hospitals, and then service the 18 Express as needed. We're going to work with our partners in Akron Metro. We're going to save some miles there. We won't be making that trip unless there's somebody there. And it'll go all the way up to Fenn Road. So we're going to take care of Board of Disability building in there too. So we're going to see some positive results. Wadsworth was a testing ground. This is kind of a proving ground. This will really make a big difference. The City Council is very excited about this. We heard excellent reviews, so we're ready to go. It'll probably take about 30 days to communicate this, and then we're ready to begin the process, cautiously optimistic to see what kind of return we get on this process. So.
Well, I know right now you're kind of stretched thin. You're lacking, you've got 2 openings in supervisors' positions.
Yep.
And some of that rollout will require, I guess, filling those and getting that support you need for expanding. And it is a huge expansion of services, no doubt. I know some of it already being served, like the Career Center and these other destinations, demand response. Right. So it kind of frees up those resources, because I know as you're saying, the denial rate is going up, and those are primarily demand response, correct?
That's correct. That's exactly what those are.
So therefore, hopefully, it could free up that bus if you ended up doing it. But the question will come down to is whether 3 is sufficient, which is currently what you have for Medina area.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We're going to run those 3 buses in this region of Medina City in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's a wide area, but we feel that we can cover it based on what's happening in Wadsworth and the mileage traveled and the amount of passengers we're going to see there. It could take a fourth. On certain days of the week, but we're making the right decisions to service the public, and they seem to be very responsive to it. I love the reduction in fuel cost, the reduction in miles, makes our vehicles last longer.
Yeah.
So,
with the idea that we're serving, well, more people utilizing it, and that's the great part of it.
That's correct.
As intended, and filling the buses up.
Right.
You talked last night about the occupancy, or the basically the revenue miles.
That's a. Thank you for saying that. Looking at, and I think I mentioned it here before, but before we did this process in Wadsworth, only 8% of the miles traveled were revenue miles. Now it's 45%. So the bus is moving with people on it, which is very, very important. Mm-hmm. It's not it reduces unnecessarily non-revenue miles, increases your revenue miles. It's just really, it works.
That's great. That's great. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Question on the, well, this isn't really a question, but you mentioned about the agency trips being increasing.
Right.
I assume you've probably, I know this is a summary for us, which I appreciate having each month. Would there be any way to quantify that in the report, just so we could kind of see year over year? Or, if that's too difficult, I can.
No, not at all. Have those graphics probably back at the office, because I track that, the upward trend. I can show those numbers to you.
I'd just be curious to see that in, black and white, because I think that's a major part, I think, of the investment, probably as it relates to the conversation we're going to have here shortly.
Fair enough.
To see the interplay between Medina Transit and our agency services too. So it's helpful for me, at least. Maybe nobody else.
I track that. I will communicate it. I'll add some information for next month, or get it to you way before then.
Perfect.
Because it is something that we track, and we're obligated, we're required, we want to provide those agency trips, and that sometimes displaces a public rider.
Yep.
But I appreciate that question, and I'll get that together. Thank you.
Super. I think as indicated yesterday, and I know we're kind of keeping track of it, but specifically what's happening in Wadsworth, I think reflects the larger changes, the changing demographic of who our riders are. And we're seeing them younger.
Yep.
And less, I'll just say, less transit dependent. In other words, that they're using transit as an option versus that's the only way they can get around.
Yeah, the dedicated rider as opposed to the preferred rider. You're exactly right.
Right.
The rider that chooses it because it's economically sound or more convenient, or sometimes it's just one of those things where it's a plan B that they need it once in a while.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, good.
The team's doing a really good job. I'm really pleased. Got some new supervisors that are very dedicated to the process and are learning quickly and allowing me to, go explore new options with grants and benchmarking and things like that. I really depend on them, and I want to thank them.
All right, so good. All right, great. Thanks, Shannon. All right. Next, we have Debbie Kiley, Job and Family Services Director. Good morning.
Good morning. 4 resolutions for your consideration this morning. The first is authorizing an agreement with APG Office Furnishings for office furnishings and installation at Medina JFS. Another is a resolution for an agreement for digital business targeting, landing page optimization, radio advertisement, and marketing with Spire Advertising. Another, an agreement for another radio advertisement and marketing between Salem Communications and Job and Family. Both of those are for foster parent recruitment efforts. And lastly, an agreement for our comprehensive case management program between Tri-County Jobs and Job and Family Services.
I'm going to make a note before we approve this that we really need to separate out the Spire Advertising approval.
Okay.
Because that's my brother's company. So that
okay. All
slipped
right.
through the cracks. I apologize. I didn't
all right.
notice that before. So to see how involved in
Okay,
that I
so-
was, I'm finding out just now that that's so.
So I will make a motion that we approve resolution number 1, 3, and 4. And we'll deal
I will
with the Spire one
second that.
separately. All right. Any discussion on those 3 motions? 3 resolutions? Roll call?
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'll now make a motion to approve with the Spire.
I will second that one.
Okay. Moving second. Any discussion?
Just to note that I'm going to be abstaining from that.
And that's
vote.
fine. That's good. Thank you for bringing that up. Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Abstain.
Sweattick?
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Super. All right.
And quick department updates. Just to let you know, for the public assistance perspective, the skimming of EBT cards, the SNAP benefits cards, is increasingly on the rise. It's either by electronic transfer of those benefits to nefarious actors, or the state has identified some retailers that are now purposefully doing it. The counties are now mandated to report any of these activities that come to us, to the state of Ohio, so that they can further investigate. Previous rules did not allow anyone who had such an activity on their benefits to get those benefits replaced. Because before all of this activity started to happen, you can, and you still can, share your PIN with your neighbor, your grandmother, your parent, whomever, if they need to shop for you. And that's okay. But we would always tell people that if you do that and they use those benefits inappropriately, we can't reimburse them. But now that the state has been able to better identify these are nefarious actors, those benefits can get replaced. They're only replaced 2 times in any federal fiscal year, and each time that benefit or each time that card is compromised, a new card is issued. So there's just like your credit card, right? When that happens, your credit card goes away for a couple of weeks and you don't have it. So it'll be problematic if it's happening over and over again, but I think they're hoping that if they're removing those cards out of the system, that will blunt that effort by whoever is trying to do it. For child support and child protective, child support's collected about $13 million in support payments this federal fiscal year, so since October, and our child protective division continues to have 149 children in care. We have about 132 in foster or kinship care, and the balance are in treatment facilities or other care entities like that. And then lastly, that JFS actually had the pleasure of hosting Ohio's Director of Job and Family Services, Matt Damschroeder. He stopped by the agency last week. He's wanting to visit all JFS offices in the state, so I raised my hand and said, please come to Medina. We had a great conversation about things that are not only happening locally, but some of the state-supported initiatives that he's heading. He's actually a great listener. He's open to hearing concerns that we have with some of those priorities, how they might impact current operations, and I am somewhat notorious within the agency for raising my hand and saying Medina will help pilot that, fill in the blank. I think it's a good idea. It gives us a seat at the table early and often. So he has some other initiatives from a workforce perspective that I've, again, raised my hand and said, please include Medina in those efforts as you're starting to pilot them. It was a wonderful visit, and I'm grateful for his attendance and collaboration, so I just wanted to let you guys know.
He came over and visited Christine Marshall's department over at 72. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was very nice.
Yeah, it was a fantastic visit. I was grateful for his attendance. That's it.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners' resolution, we have a resolution appointing and reappointing members to the Medina County Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Board, or ADAM Board. This essentially, Christine Qualich replacing Dennis Hanwell for terms expired June 30th, 2027. Jim Shields will be appointed replacing outgoing Thomas Miller. Term expires June 30th, 2027. And Melissa Pierce basically being reappointed for the term expires June 30th, 2027. I will move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Thanks to the outgoing members. Been there for many years and have added quite a bit, I think, to the policy, the process, the programming, everything, and all the successes that have been going on over at the ADAM Board for a number of years. So I want to thank them for their service, as well as Melissa Pierce for continuing to be involved on that board. Roll call, please.
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Okay. Next, open up for public comment. Okay, I guess that takes care of that. We will now open up for discussion session. Did we want to start with the Human Services Levy first? Sure. Seem to have some people assembled here for that, so that's probably of the primary interest. Chris, did you want to do a little warm-up on this one? Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Just put together some various documents, kind of summarize
Thanks, Chris.
where we currently are. Okay, thanks, Chris. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that various folks. As you know, sorry about that. As you know, there's a current social service levy on the books in Medina County. It was first approved by the voters in November 2019. It's a $1 million levy, and the proceeds from the levy are currently shared by our County Job and Family Services Office, our ADAM Board, and our Office for Older Adults. The top page shows some levy collection amount information and the split between the three agencies participating in the current proceeds. It also shows further down on the page estimated replacement levy costs, if there was an interest in discussing that, and also the renewal of the same current 1.0 mil effective beginning in tax year 2024, first collection in 2025. The next 3 pages were received from the 3 participating agencies, 3 spreadsheets that show budget projections based on information currently known, and includes reference to the levy proceeds and the importance of those revenues in the operations of the 3 agencies. I've also attached information received from the county auditor's office based on the calculations of renewal and replacement levies. And finally, I've recently received from Laura Toth, our OOA director, a newspaper article that I think was from Elyria, Lorraine, that indicated that Medina County has one of the largest aging populations in terms of growth in the state. I believe they rank 6th in the state, fastest aging counties, with 128.2% increase in the proportion of people over 60 based on the census data between 2000 and 2022. Laura also is quoted in there. The article is saying that her organization has seen a steady increase in need for service as it correlates to that increase in population. The three agency directors are present this morning. I think it'd be helpful if we heard individually from them.
Sure.
About their projected need in the next 5, 6, 7 years. And hopefully we can have some further and ongoing discussions about proceeding. As you know, to get on the November ballot, we'll have to adopt a resolution authorizing the tax levy to be placed on the ballot in the November election by the very beginning of August.
And we have a two-step process, right?
And there's a subsequent resolution also.
Sure.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
So, if you want to have them
Sure.
come up individually,
Yeah, who wants
or?
to, I guess, come up first, Laura? Phil was keeping his eyes down. I think he must be the last one, because he knows he's the longest one.
I'll just talk about, Chris asked us to prepare, numbers for cost projections throughout, I think I did mine through 2028, which are included in the packet. And as you can see, based on, it's the page with the green top, based on our projections, the last line of that says levy funding. That is money that we would have to pull out of our levy fund. It's kind of confusing. It's not what we're bringing in every year, but it would be what we have to pull out of that fund number to maintain our proposed budget. We are anticipating a little bit of a cost grant increase from Western Reserve based on the census number that Chris was just talking about. And this year and in subsequent years, since we have taken on Adult Protective Services, I've spoken with Debbie Kiley and JFS, and they are helping to subsidize that program. They get a state allocation for Adult Protective Services. They also are still doing the intake, the initial phone call for that service, but they have other funding that's dedicated to Adult Protective Services, and a portion of that is brought over to fund that department. The other part of that department is funded through the levy. That department is approximately, I don't think I have that line item. Well, I do. Currently about $275,000, $299 actually in '23, and then going up from there. I think this particular year, I believe JFS has about $60,000 that has been transferred over. So a lot, the bulk of that is paid for with Human Services levy money.
And I understand, too, with the current budget process, there's been proposals to bump that up, but also
Correct.
reduce it, so until they work out this.
Absolutely.
We won't know, at least for the next biennium. It
Correct.
could be a bump, maybe not. I guess
Yeah.
we'll.
We're pulling for
kinda status
the word
quo.
on the word on the street is 80,000.
Yeah.
So even at if
A little bit of bump.
correct, even if they bumped it up, that is like the max. So it's not like they're going to go from
That's right.
40 to 200.
Yeah, understand.
It's a very interesting calculation because that's per county.
Well,
so
that's actually,
like everybody gets
That's
80,000.
applying about every department that's coming up for this discussion.
Yeah.
Because right now, we're waiting to see how the state budget works out for the next couple of years, and a lot of changes, so, okay.
And also on there is the Wadsworth Cafe project. Certainly that was a big undertaking, and will continue to be. It's very hard to estimate what the income is going to be from that cafe. Our daily sales have gone anywhere from $150 to $1,200. It just kind of depends. So until we can get data, I have old cost projections from old vendors, but until we can really get our own data, I don't feel kind of comfortable giving any kind of estimate. It'll be something, but even, when I presented the initial cafe project, that's something that is going to be subsidized by the Human Services levy, even if all of our dreams came true. I just see that happening. I would love for it. The goal is to get it cost neutral, but that's going to be several years, if ever. So those are our big things. I think, a replacement levy, this will be my third time at it. Certainly in 15, there wasn't a lot of appetite for the tax levy, and in 19, it certainly was very welcome, and I think that replacing it is certainly, what we want to do, and what we're going for, and I believe you'll hear the same from Philip and Debbie. We're very lucky that we all get along very well. We have regular meetings to talk about how we are going to recommend the funds being dispersed and things of that nature. So so far so good. The one thing I would say that a lot of our growth, we've grown a lot since 2019, and a lot of future funding will go to sustaining the growth that we've had. I don't see any huge, I always say that, I don't see any huge projects coming down the line, and I'm like, look what I thought of, no. But I would see it sustaining the big projects that we've taken on the last several years. So that's Adult Protective, that's Wadsworth, and the other expansion that we've had. Certainly our meal numbers, home delivered meals have gone up probably 20-25% since COVID, and sustained there. So it'll just be, my anticipation is for ongoing funding.
Okay. Now, you put the one caveat here is transportation.
Correct.
In terms of its variability. And
Correct.
you indicate a potential increase in cost per mile. But we know with our change in system, we're actually seeing, quote, reduction in cost per mile.
That's transit's cost.
That's transit's cost, right. But
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Trying to articulate, but since we have potentially more beneficiaries, there is that increased cost component that you're anticipating, right? Because you have more people that might be qualified.
Correct.
The
Absolutely.
larger population.
Absolutely, and as the new transit program is taking off like wildfire, there'll be more people. But we are locked into a transit we're one of the agencies that's a contractor. So typically that goes up a little bit every year. I think right now it's at $3.
Right.
It might go up to $3.25, $3.50, depending on Shannon's funding and what they need from the agencies to operate. So that's always kind of a variable.
That's per eligible ride.
Correct. The one thing we're working on right now is to try and get a fixed cost for people who are taking the flex.
Right.
So we can bill per client. Right now, we're giving local money, levy money, to a bulk rate so I think it's $1,400 a month, and that's for loop rides in the county.
Right.
And anybody can ride, at no cost. We want to keep that no cost, but if I can get it to per ride, it's X number of dollars. We haven't come up with the number yet. I'll be able to, instead of having it total local funding, I'll be able to cost some of that off to our transit grant.
Right, and I understand that. I guess that it ends up, certainly as transit becomes much more available, a senior, we have senior eligible, we'll have seniors that are eligible for some trips to be subsidized, especially with the flex. They may choose to do things that are, quote, not eligible under our system. I mean,
Correct.
Going to the park is not ineligible, but going to the doctor
Correct.
is.
Right now.
That's right now. I know. So I guess I know that's the one variable that we have to how we're going to continue to support transit in the longer term. We right now are flush with cash, and that's we know we've got quite a bit of resources for various reasons, but we know a number of years we're going to have much more local funding, and as we grow the system, we need to make sure we have that capacity long-term, and that's hence, including in the discussion, is that something we can address in the next couple of years? Should we address it now? And that's really why I was bringing it up for discussion, knowing that it is one of the independent variables that affects your operation, Phil's operation, and Job and Family Services.
Yeah, the other thing I do want to mention is while we will always have a subsidized transit program, I am exploring taking that out of Western Reserve funding, receiving their funds, but dividing them up differently, just because of some of the requirements they have for a transit system that it puts a big stress on the transit system for them to meet the requirements of the grant. And since we are considered a subcontractor, there's really no choice. They have to meet the requirements. So I'm just beginning to explore with Shannon, can we do the money a different way and fund transit totally in a local way, and that will affect that's why I said for right now, what trips might be covered and things like that.
And I know in part of our long-range plan that we had those issues of out-of-county medical that you continue to hear. Veterans, I mean, just go down the list of those services, how we can provide that in the future will have to be brought up for certainly discussion and decisions.
Absolutely.
But that also affects your population.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else?
Do I get to ask a question?
No.
Just for clarification. I'm getting older, so I may have misheard, but when you said the recommendation, what were you recommending for the levy for the?
We used the word replacement. I think
I'm
maybe
sorry,
you meant
renewal.
Yes.
I apologize.
know.
Thank you.
I caught that too. I was going to bring it up when we
Thank
talk
you.
about it further.
Thank you, so renewal.
I have a habit of saying when I'm not a politician. No.
It was her inner voice going, yeah.
No, not at all, not at all. That was
Would
just,
understand the practical end.
I must say, in all honesty,
Yeah.
the reverse happened earlier this week, where Philip was saying replacement. I'm like, you mean renewal? So, yeah.
Well, I mean, we talked about last week, and one of the reasons for bringing it up is because I thought it was necessary for discussion purposes. We have an effective millage right now of .70 mils. It's a 1 mil levy, and the legislature is considering eliminating replacement entirely in the future. So I think it only makes sense, if we're looking long-term funding, should we be talking about it? And if we don't, okay, fine. But we have to also understand, we've done in the past replacement with reductions when McDack levy. And you're just basically trying to adjust the millage. And unfortunately, our property tax system is so complicated, very few understand it or want to understand it. But it's one of those areas that is, since we have to provide the services, and that's one of our means of funding it, we ought to at least talk about it and kind of at least knowingly realize, okay, if that window's closed, if we don't want to take that window, that's fine, but we have to recognize as to what that means.
Yeah, and I think another thing that means is it shows just the growth in the last 4 years in the county. It's quite amazing.
Based on the current system, and I just have been conversation with John Hunter with the auditor's office about the changes even under the current bill of how taxes are calculated for specific parcels, as well as even the reappraisal systems. They're talking about doing a 3-year average instead of the hot peak that we saw, and then the consequences of a statewide tax abatement program for new construction of residential. As it has immense consequences to our tax budgets. And a lot of that's in the background, and so that could very well change, our future funding for a lot of things. But I think we recognize that these things are going to change, but we want to make sure that our base programs that you're providing are going to have funding.
Absolutely.
And that's your main message, right?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for the summary.
Sure. I did. And to clarify, renewal is what you've asked for. Okay, got it. Debbie, did you want to come up, talk about so yours is just a lot simpler, I guess? Or not?
Probably all depends. If you look at that sheet, there's probably a few more lines than Laura and Philip's budget, but I can't speak for them, but Job and Family Services receives funding not only from the levy, but also from state and federal dollars. And then we also receive some reimbursements of costs that we expense out. So, and those reimbursements are based on the percentage of what you're spending anyway. So there's a lot of different variables here, but what I'll point out is that the governor has been very attentive to Child Protective, and he's made sure both in this current executive budget and prior budgets, income or revenue that comes directly to Job and Family Services. So we are indeed grateful for that, and we're also incredibly grateful for the approval of this levy from the voters, because if not for those two things, we wouldn't be able to meet the needs of care for the children that we currently have. Before, in 2020, 2021, we were averaging maybe 78, 80 children in care, and since probably January of 21, and then throughout that year, it rose exponentially. There was 1 week where we took in 20 children in 1 week. We haven't had those kinds of numbers since then, but the numbers in total have remained in the 140, 130 mark. So when I'm talking about that, the average cost of care, it's about $2,000 per child per month. The levy wouldn't be enough to meet that all on its own. The state and federal dollars would not be enough to meet that all on its own. So that's why we're so grateful that those three things are combined together so that we can continue to meet that need. And I will say that Philip, Laura, and I, we work incredibly well together. So the county, I think, is really blessed by our collaborative and also creative efforts. And also, I think even for Philip, and my agency, we are often budgeting based on human behavior, and that can be really tricky to budget for. So even though that there's a balance on my sheet at the end of every month, or proposing at the end of every year, that's a great problem to have, because then I am insulating the agency from being able to not provide for a potentially another increase in population. So there's dollars left over to take care of that. Any questions? Aaron, you're writing furiously.
Yeah, Aaron?
I'm just gathering my notes. No, so that's actually the note I was just making, was the as I look at, to the extent there's a difference between expenses and revenue, that's building a cushion for future needs.
Exactly. And not only the number of children that we have in care, but the residential facilities in 2022, their costs increased by over a third per day. Their per diem increased over a third, and that was shocking for every county Department of Job and Family Services that had children in care. For 2023, those rates have somewhat steadied. They're increasing what would be typical, a 3%-ish increase. There were some significant rules put into place for those facilities that they now had to meet. It's called QRTP, Qualified Residential Treatment. And those were extensive for those facilities. So I think they were looking at that going, I'm going to have to staff all this, I'm going to have to do all this, and that costs money. So their per diem went up exponentially. It's like I said, it has leveled out, but some of those costs of care, one per diem might be $300 if a child meets that level of care. There's another facility that's $900 per day. If I have to place a child in a $900 per day facility, I'm going to need that balance at the end of the month in order to do that. And that's part of that human behavior it's really hard to forecast for.
But at this point, you're asking for basically from the levy funds, flat funding.
Correct. Yeah, a renewal.
No, but yes, I understand, but you're basically flat funding.
Yes.
From levy funds. Your assumption is that any other balance will come from either state, federal, or our local government, or basically our general revenue fund.
Yes, I mean,
The commissioners, when we do our annual appropriations or additional emergency appropriations.
Exactly, if necessary.
If
right?
necessary.
Right.
Okay.
Right now, the general revenue doesn't fund this budget. It's the levy, state, and federal dollars. So
Right.
we're neutral as far as that's concerned.
Right. But I just want to make it clear basically the premise is if you do have those kind of costs, that you have a certain amount of cushion, but if it exceeds that, then the commissioners would have to come up with those or find a state or federal program or not provide them. But we're obligated to actually provide those.
Yes.
Those services when those costs go up. When you have those individuals under your custody, we have to pay for those services. Okay.
But also to kind of put a finer point on that, with the renewal funds, you're providing the needed amounts plus a bit of cushion already.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then if something even more unforeseen happened, that's
Right.
when we get into kind of those more problematic circumstances.
Or if the state or feds basically decide that
Yeah.
they're going to decline, that there's a change in governor, General
Right.
Assembly, we do only 2-year budgets.
Yep.
They decide more upon the local governments, based upon, as you said, it's all about human behavior. We have an increased cost, and they decided that they're going to do less reimbursement, then
Exactly.
we're the ones that are going to have to pick up that cost.
Exactly.
So some of the human behavior could be at the legislative level.
Right, at the legislative level. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
It is the case, as well as voter behavior.
Right.
Yeah, right. And there's also a new department that's being created as part of the budget, the Department of Children and Youth. So that's going to break off Child Protective off of Job and Family Services, so yet another divorce. So Ohio Department of Medicaid is separated now, Job and Family Services, and then the Department of Youth will take on Family First for one, but also Child Protective. So I'm not sure from a budgeting perspective how that breaks off too.
Right.
So once again, that human behavior.
Human behavior and also federal and state policies.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's almost is a good segue for Phil, right? If you don't mind me moving her along.
No, it's, so what do I have, 20, 30 minutes? Because you already made the comment earlier.
Measuring in seconds.
But for the record, yes, Laura took a long time. But it was good. So I don't mind coming last, because they did say some nice things, so I do appreciate that. But
Okay.
Looking at the budget, I think what you heard today is first of all, thank you to the voters. Without this levy, what the Adam Board's been able to do with this levy is truly expand and hit those additional needs. It's very hard for us to capture specifically where everything goes down, but giving you pretty much a snapshot. Projecting 5 years is when you start talking once again about human behavior. We don't know. You heard a little bit about youth. So the good news is some of the conversation came up, right, with Jobs and Family Services and what happens if levy dollars aren't there and who's going to pick up the cost. Well, rest assured, I think because of the collaboration, and we've shown that over the last 4 or 5 years, that we get real creative. So when Debbie's talking about, it's actually a $911.82 a day for a facility that we have a youth in, and it's a youth that we share. So when we get to that point and we're all sharing these, we're serving basically the same individuals. And through the levy, what it has taught us is we work very closely together. We meet very often so that we can look at it. And so when it comes up, we can make an informed decision. So yes, as we're looking at the risk and reward, if you will, what's the need? We're trying to predict. My budget, as Commissioner Hambley mentioned, is right now it's all over the place. We're in the middle of a biennium, or just the start of a biennium. Adam Board funding relies heavily on state funding. And right now, we don't know where it's going to be. So with the levy, that provides us with some cushion to be able to and hit the expanded need that's there. So I really don't know. So when I'm presenting a budget and we have to sign, right by June, we're all over the place with that. And it's very variable. So one of the big costs that we have is as we see individuals in need of mental health with serious mental illness, and then they go to the state psychiatric hospital for whatever reason. Sometimes it's out of our control and maybe a forensic, or the judges feel, or the jail feels. They're coming back into our county. We need to find a place for them. We need to wrap services around them. So when we're talking adult group homes, for example, and it's the old economics, supply and demand. There are less adult care facilities, there's less residential, so the price goes up. As we just saw over 1 year, we saw one of the adult care places go up from $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Well, we can do the math on that one, right? Plus we're wrapping around services. So what we've tried to do is present and provide you with what we think is going to happen based on kind of where we're at today. And a big chunk of the way that the Adam Board provides funding is purchase of service. So we're trying to be the payer of last resort, if you will. So you have Medicaid, Medicare, some of the other insurances out there. So when we have contracts, these large ones with agencies to provide services, behavioral health, we're anticipating that they go out and they try to get additional revenue, right? But as we see individuals maybe with less insurance, more on the sliding fee scale, more from us, it fluctuates. So with the purchase of service, once again, that's one of those where we're not really sure. We have a pretty good idea, but maybe is going to be left or is not. So we really are heavily dependent on the levy. We're going to try to, continue to show the taxpayers that what you've approved and what you're paying into, we are managing as best as we possibly can. So I know the question keeps coming up in terms of, can we do what we have? We're going to try. We absolutely are going to try, and then we're going to be able to hopefully show then in the future what that need is, if it has to go up or what have you. So, have any questions? I know it's probably shorter than you used to.
That's good. Brevity is rewarded sometimes. Okay.
Evidently, that's not my name, so. No questions?
No, thank you. I think you've given us a lot of information and so forth, and I know we've continued to go over this. And I know I asked Shannon here for being here, because transportation often is one of those services that all agencies end up using. We keep hearing about the increased need. And I think since last week, some of my questions that I had been posing had been answered via email. It appears that the levy language with the replacement, even with the replacement, you could not add any additional services because the agencies themselves have been identified as part of that, and it would be then classified new, which is something I wish I'd known some time ago. But I'm glad we have that clarity. But I think I wanted to bring transit here to make sure that it was understood that longer-term funding is going to be needed for not only these agencies, but for the general public, and we're eventually going to have to come up with dedicated funding. This is not going to be the opportunity, it looks like, that I would have liked to see. They would have been qualified back in 2019 as a service, but that was a decision for the board to make at that time, and I understand why they didn't include it, but I think longer term, now that we've got opportunities for building in a good service that has, I think we'll have a broader constituency in the future, we'll have to deal with that, and we'll have to work that through. And I do appreciate the auditor's work in giving us the revenue projections as to trying to deal with what a replacement would go. Likewise, the difference between the McDack levy, as I understand, and this. We don't have a rollback reimbursement in this levy like they do in the McDack levy. So it's actually more straightforward. So I'm glad we're sending the message that we're being frugal and the agencies are not asking for really an increase. And I think that's the message. You'll make do, even though there's a lot of variability. And so in the future, if the state and the feds change their rules, change how things go, then we may have to. If the commissioners can't afford it, go back. But at this point, probably don't need to. So I think, at least from my perspective, I'm comfortable with moving with a renewal.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it the same way. The only point of clarification, I do appreciate the help that went into clarifying that we can't bring in new agencies.
Yeah.
And that does kind of limit our availability. And this is just for my own benefit because I'm new to the discussion. The allocation between the agencies, is that locked in as well, or is that Laura? Yeah.
Okay. We meet usually in September, October, and come up with a recommendation, and then it's presented to the board. So it's not, we get this exact amount, we just recommend what will work for our agencies. It hasn't changed since 19, it doesn't mean it won't.
That was,
but it's not locked.
So my understanding was that it stayed the same, but I didn't think it had to. That was what I wanted to clarify.
So you were kind of asking if it was part of the levy language.
Right.
And it's not.
I didn't believe that it was.
No.
Yeah, but I didn't know if our hands were tied in any respect.
It certainly would be up to the future board, our board, and the future boards to make that over that term of that levy, the distribution of that. And I think that really is the benefit of that.
That's
You're
right.
identifying the services. It is a human services levy, and given that state funding goes up and down, federal funding like this, and the rules go up and down like this, there may have to be shifts.
Yep.
But then it has to be made up with other revenues. And
Right.
the commissioners are actually in the best position to find those other additional
Yeah.
revenues, hopefully not without going back to the taxpayers, but to find other opportunities for partnerships and programs and whatever else might be. So
and I think that's an important distinction,
Yes.
because on the one hand, it's not flexible because we can't add a new agency, which is unfortunate.
Right.
On the other hand, it provides some needed flexibility within the agencies that are already included, and I think that combined with the collaboration we have of the agencies involved is a
And
benefit.
a recognition there is that right now the relationship is largely a contracted service with transit.
Yeah.
For those agencies. So they're kind of like an incidental beneficiary.
Right.
But we also have a changing demographic of more and more of the public that aren't eligible as a senior or a person with alternative paths or not with Job and Family Services wanting to use transit. And we're going to have to recognize we're going to have to come up with that group, with that eventually with funding for that. For various reasons. I don't think, it was a historic bump in funding for transit. Certainly, in the first 18 years I was here as commissioner, we didn't have nowhere near the money for transit that they do now, which is great, but we know in the next number of years that may not be the case, in which case, as we change and improve our service and serve more people, we may have to find other resources. But this is not one of them.
Right. And specific to this discussion about this potential renewal, I just don't want people to get the wrong impression that it's somehow limits us in a way that we can't work with. I think it works really well for the human services agencies. So, and I'm again, credit to the taxpayers and for kind of the forward thinking of the department heads to come up with it in the first place.
Indeed. And, well, I think frugality. At this point, they've got a budget, they're working with it, and they're going to continue to provide necessary services based upon those those, if you will, restrictions. So, yeah, I
So
agree.
we'll have Chris move forward with the first
Sure,
resolution.
to get a resolution of estimated of revenue for that? Okay, all right. Okay. Anything else we need to do on this one?
Thank you for the,
Yeah, thanks for coming forward. Chris, do you have anything else for discussion?
Just in deference to, I think Denise Tesla and Bethany Denton.
Oh, wanted to bring up-
Chat about no.
Oh, NOACA, our favorite five-letter word.
just to be clear, we put Philip on the clock. We'll give you guys a little bit more latitude.
Oh, geez. All right, so we had attended, or I had attended, the NOACA meeting on Friday, and they had indicated regarding their climate action plan that they are beginning to schedule engagement sessions within the 5-county region, and I just thought that perhaps we could begin a discussion as to how Medina County would like to proceed with those. They've hired a consultant to schedule those, and so is there anything you wanted to? And we have invited them to come to the county earlier this year, and unfortunately that did not occur. So this is kind of a follow-up to that. Go ahead.
Well, I think from our perspective, we had wanted to make sure that there was engagement, particularly from the business community. There may be others who want to have input, elected officials, et cetera, who are interested in transportation funding and how the climate action plan might impact that. Looking at the proposed agenda, there seems to be a lot of focus on, I guess, input into climate risks and resiliency. I would hope there might be an opportunity to expand the agenda a little bit. So I don't know if there's room for a negotiation. I know you've been talking with Grace, but
Yep.
We're certainly standing ready to help them set up focus groups that are going to be effective for both of us so that we can get information and share our feedback.
Yeah, and I appreciate Denise's update on this, because I had another conversation with Grace Galucci at NOACA just this week, and mentioned that we because originally I think there was a tentative schedule for a meeting on July 5th, and that she said that had never been approved, I guess. So that's good. I thought maybe they were just going to try to tuck us in on July 5th, and then see how well attended that would be. But I did mention the need for maybe a couple different meetings here with different target audiences and perhaps different geographies. And I am going to reach out and maybe with your help a little bit, reach out to, is it Joel?
Joel Radner.
Radner, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to reach out to him because apparently originally there were some funding limitations on the number of sessions they were willing to do. But in my conversation yesterday, it sounds like that's been cleared up. So there is a little bit of additional latitude, hopefully to have, a few different discussions and perhaps maybe that cover the items on their part of the agenda and also cover some items that are on our part of the agenda.
Well, and I know that they'll do their typical, broadcast and public notice of the meeting, but once we get the dates and locations set up, then, on our part, we'd like to do specific invitations so that we can
Sure.
try to get the people in the room that we know need to provide that input.
Yep. No, I think that is definitely a priority for me. I think it's shared by everybody else up here, that we get the right audience in the room to share their concerns and be more reflective, because it's one thing when the group of us, we've shared our concerns somewhat ad nauseum on it, but to have some other folks who share those concerns and are kind of advocating for the perspective of the typical business owner in Medina County, I think it should be received a little bit differently too.
Yeah, I think we can get them down here for a barbecue. Not on the menu, I was thinking as guests. Andy Conrad has done an annual barbecue with the trustees and with all the road maintenance people. It certainly is a topic of considerable, and it is a public meeting.
Yeah.
And I just recently learned under that provision of the code that requires an annual meeting that the commissioners approve the date and the time.
Okay.
And the place. So we could talk to Andy of whether he wants to host a barbecue for the community action, or the climate action plan with the trustees. And it is a public meeting, technically, so just throwing that out.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Andy's probably watching this and probably going, oh, no. But that's okay.
Thank you both. I just also, as they're walking out, Denise and Bethany have both done a really good
Oh,
job of
yes.
keeping us informed with everything that's going on up there. So, yeah, before I let you out, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you. Ditto. Ditto on that. All right. You have anything else? Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Courthouse, I think he's gonna leave the courthouse lease discussion.
Oh, yes, okay.
Just a brief update on the ongoing courthouse lease matter with the city of Medina. I received correspondence from the mayor this morning saying that they had council had met and had the first reading, which, as you know, previously we discussed that they were going to have 3 readings, first and second, to be held within several weeks of each other, and then their summer recess hits. The third reading would not take place until August. But they had their first, I believe it was last night, at council meeting, and he responded that there were no concerns raised by council or the public after the first reading, and that the second reading is scheduled for July 10th. There's one exhibit reference correction that needs to be made on the second page. Instead of saying Exhibit A and Exhibit A/B, it should say just Exhibit A/B. So I'll work with the city to get that corrected. So I just wanted to let you know of the progress that's being made there, and hopefully we can continue to move forward.
So there's no additional changes at this point?
John Coyne wasn't there last night, as I understood. So
I'm not aware of the attendance last night, so.
But, well, we know he's kind of been involved with this whole discussion from the very beginning.
Certainly.
So
And,
yeah, he's
yes.
had his opportunity for input. For sure.
Certainly. So
Okay.
just wanted to provide you with that update. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Good. I'm glad to see it continue to move forward, although I'd like to see it completed sooner than later, but dragged out quite a bit. We did ask them for Memorial Day, and now it's ending up like Labor Day before we actually complete it. So. Yeah. Okay, all right.
When the only revision is the identity of an exhibit,
I know.
That is progress. We can't pretend
Amen.
it's not progress.
Amen.
so.
Like I said, they got the deal of the century. So, okay. Colleen, do you have any?
I just wanted to announce that Rhonda and Brian have taken care of all of our needs for the fair, so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. All right. Anything else? All right.
Oh, nothing for me. Yep.
Okay, well, do you want to make a motion?
Oh, yeah, I guess I need to do that, don't I?
Make a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second? Roll call?
Hambley?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Sweattick?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.